Another thing to keep in mind when you're foraging is if you don't have a property of your own that you can go and pick out cut greenery from, is if you want to ask your neighbor or you just have a park around town, just remember to always get permission. Very key to ask permission. Do not go on personal private property and cut greenery or foliage, or on national park land where some of those plants and flowers are protected. So you do not want to be caught cutting anything that's considered a protected species. Hi guys, happy Thanksgiving week. I thought I'd do a quick bonus video for you showing you how I design my table centerpieces. I'm going to do a basic, simple centerpiece for beginners. Just a very basic, very simple. You don't need to know how to even design to do this. And then a more moderate or intermediate style cornucopia arrangement, and explain how those work. And then I might do, I am going to show you how to process flowers from the grocery store, because I think a lot of you will buy a bouquet from the grocery store, a mixed bouquet, and then you just plop it in a vase and it just looks upright and kind of boring. And my philosophy is on how to purchase cut flowers at the grocery store, because it is a little bit of a trick to it. So I hope this will be helpful for you. I know it's a busy week. You may not even have time to do flowers, but if you do want to do something and you don't want to spend an arm and a leg at the flower shop, and I know for some people it's their yearly order the centerpiece from the florist and do it. Some of you like to DIY it, and some of you just can't even think about doing flowers. It's just one added layer. But here we go. We're going to try to do a little simple tutorial. This will be the first time I've filmed a tutorial in my house, and my lighting in my kitchen is not great, so I was going to film in front of the window over here, but that seemed to be worse. So I'm flipping it around, and we're going to use the island as our workspace, and I'll show you how to do all of this. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you guys enjoy this. It'll be fun. When you're purchasing flowers from a grocery store, you want to keep a couple of things in mind. You're going to determine what kind of bowl or container you're going to be using, a color theme, and then when you're selecting your cut flowers, you want to look for freshness. You might want to become familiar with the person who works in the floral department and find out what days the flowers come on. I will tell you, most of the flowers that are delivered to grocery stores are delivered the weekend before, the week that they're needed, sometimes a week before, depending on how they process and get the product out. So you always want to check for freshness. If you shop your store on a weekly or regular basis, you can kind of start becoming familiar with how the flowers look in the floral department. And then when you're choosing your flowers, you're going to kind of have a better eye for what's good and what's not. Also, in the bouquets, make sure there's no broken heads or broken stems, because that's annoying when you paid for the flowers and you get home and you've got some broken heads. Philosophies on getting cut flowers also at the grocery store, because you can't go in, it's not like a wholesaler where you can select one kind of flower at a time and purchase just that one kind of flower. You really do have to buy whatever they have on hand. Modern grocery stores now have such a great selection, and if you're in a big city, you can almost get better flowers there than you can sometimes at your local wholesaler. It just really depends on what they have. But what I like to do is keep it simple, and I usually just work with 1, 2, or 3 flowers at a time. Today, I don't live in an area where there's great cut flowers, and even my local wholesaler here in Louisiana is not good. Not good. And Louisiana is a very strange way that they handle you being able to buy cut flowers from the wholesaler. You have to have not only do you, and you should have a business license to operate as a florist, but in Louisiana, you have to have a special license to just even design. So you can't just say, okay, I'm going to open up a flower shop and go and get the business license, the tax ID, and all the things that you need, without also going this extra step, which no other state in the rest of the country that I know of has this law where you have to get a special license just to be a designer. And I think this is unfortunate. I don't know why Louisiana is like this, but it's an old law that's been on the books. I think it's a competition thing, because you literally have to go in front of your peers and prove that you can design, and then they judge you. And you have to pay for it yourself. You have to go and buy all the flowers and do the designs that are required, and it's a whole thing. And so I only know this because when I moved here, I thought, oh, you know, if I feel like it, I guess I could just go and work as a florist again, even though I had retired. But then I had the great idea, the wild idea, to grow flowers on my property. And I got all the business license that you need to do that. A friend of mine passed away, and I decided I'm going to make her flowers for her funeral service. And when I went, they told me, yeah, you can only buy flowers if you have a floral designer's license as well. So they did sell me the flowers, but it was kind of strange. And they didn't have a great set of flowers to buy from anyway. So, and the same is true still. I was going to do a video last week about on centerpieces, but the flower selection was not great at my local grocery store. And today wasn't much better, although very surprisingly, I found these chocolate roses. They're a rose here that was very popular a few years ago called Toffee. And then these roses look like, some of them look like they were dyed. You can usually tell when flowers are dyed because the leaves will be colored as well. And so when you're selecting flowers from your wholesaler or your local grocery store, you want to check the quality and make sure that your roses are fresh. If you want to test that, you'd go in and you'll squeeze the rose. It should feel like a hard-boiled egg. If it squishes, or if it feels hollow, then that rose is not fresh any longer. These are kind of in between, but it was the best I could do, and they were such a cool color. I love these cinnamon, chocolates, browns, toffee, taupe colors. I think they're really beautiful. For Thanksgiving, this works perfect for a table display I'm going to do. And then I also got some Eryngium. This is a filler, looks like thistle, and one of my favorite fillers to use. So I tend to typically just buy 1 or 2 or 3 kinds of flowers. The rule of thumb is you're supposed to have a focal flower, a filler flower, kind of a line flower, but for this, we don't need all of that. So when you get your package, it's going to come in cello like this. Make sure you get your flowers in water as soon as you get home. And how you'll want to do that is by cutting the stems. And there's different ways you can cut your flowers. Now, if you're someone who thinks you might want to do flowers on a regular basis and you really want to learn the skills, then there's some tools you should have. Just back in the water for right now. These are a pair of florist shears, cutting shears. They have a really narrow tip, and you can find these at hardware stores as well. There's also these kinds of shears. These are prune cutters, prune branches, but what you really want to be cutting your flowers with are a knife. Now, if you want to start an argument between a couple of florists, you can ask them, should you cut your flowers with a knife or with shears or clippers? We call them clippers. And they're so divided, and it really, to me, depends on the flower. I have used both my entire career. Knife is preferable. Knife is what you should use, but a lot of people are very nervous about using a knife. So if that's the case, then use clippers. But you should not be using shears or scissors unless they look kind of like these. These are Japanese style scissors used for pruning. But honestly, what happens with the shears is they crush the vascular system on the outside of the flower. And roses are very susceptible to getting a little water air bubble in their stems. So you want to make sure that you're not cutting them with shears, because that crushes that woody vascular system. And I'll show you what I mean. So you're going to take them out of the plastic. And these roses appear to not have very many thorns on them. There's also a package of flower food that will come with your flowers. This is important for your cut flowers, but I caution you about how you use this. Follow the directions and make sure you dilute it. If it needs an entire, and it's been a while, so I rarely use It's called Cresol. I rarely use it, but it says 1 liter. So you would mix this package with 1 liter of water. Pre-mix it, dissolve it well, and then use it in your water supply in whatever vase you're using. But as long as you keep your water clean, and you need to be scrupulously clean with your vessels, your vases. Anything that you're using needs to not have any film of bacteria in it, or any old debris from cut flower arrangements that you've done. I cannot tell you how many clients over the years have brought me dirty vases to design in from their home. And I'm just like, am I supposed to wash this? Okay. So it's sometimes people will just reuse a vase. And what happens is you'll get these brown kind of thick, crusty sort of, I don't know what you call it. It's gross bacteria that's dried from the flowers or leaves being in water. Really important to keep your foliage and your leaves out of the water for long-lasting arrangements. If you're doing a centerpiece for like a one-shot thing, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't need to last longer than a day, but make sure that you are that you're keeping the flowers in water. I think my heater just turned on, and I'm gonna turn that off because it'll make too much noise on the video. Okay, sorry about that. So with roses, the general rule of thumb, and as you can see, these are pretty thornless, which is lucky for us. And I'm gonna have to put my glasses on. I know that glare bothers some of you, but I really need to see what I'm doing. You wanna make sure if you're using a rose long stemmed that you cut off any foliage, so below 1/4. So if your stem is this long, you guys can see, then you wanna make sure you take off foliage. The easiest way to do that is just pull it off, or you can use your knife to nip it off. The important part of a rose is the vascular system. And that's the green on the outside. Sorry, 1 second. That was the weirdest noise, and it was my water cooler doing something strange over there. Okay, let's start over. So on the stem of the rose, it's green. There's a green vascular, or it's a woody stemmed flower. This is the vascular system. So if you look at a rose, if you look at the bottom of the rose, you'll see there's a white center with green going around it. And a lot of people make the mistake of nicking that part. So I'm going to show you with my knife. Okay. So if I do that, you'll see I've just kind of cut that part. If that part is above the water line, this will cause an air bubble in the rose, and that's where you see roses where their heads droop over like that. Proper way to process a rose is to remove the foliage up to this point if you're going to use them long. If you're going to cut them short anyway, just take all the foliage off, because the foliage the foliage needs water too, and it's what draws the water up, but it also takes water from the head of the rose, if that makes sense. So you want to take that off. So I am going to be using these short, so I'm going to cut them short. So I'm going to take all the leaves off, and then I'm also going to take off what we call the packing petals, and that is the outside petals on a rose. And the way to remove that is push your finger down to the very edge, make sure you've got a grip on it on both sides, and just pull it off. Okay, if you have a little tear, then take that off there too. And we're going to do it again. And again. Now you can see, I told you guys I was pretty sure these had been dyed. You can see, or even they might have even been painted, but they look like they've been dyed or dyed. You can see the colors there. Okay, the way, if you want to learn how to cut with a knife, then you're going to use a florist knife, Swiss Army knife that looks like this. You hold it in your hand like this. You're going to keep the rose away from you. You're going to keep the knife on like so. And you're going to do a pulling motion with your arms, okay? Now, when I was learning how to do flowers when I was younger, a lot of florists, when they would try to teach me, they would say, you got to go down like this and away from your body, which is a safe way to do it. But you've got to make sure your knife is sharp. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you get this. And even when your knife is sharp, you can still get that. But And that's a way to do it. You just hold it away from you, push down. You have to be careful because if you torque it too much, you can snap the head right off, okay? So the way to do this is, because I'm going to be using these short, is to, I'm holding the knife like this, keeping it away from my body, and I pull up like that. So my arms are what are cutting the roses, I'm not hacking it, I'm not trying to pull it or whatever. That's just too much for you and you were like, nope, not doing that. Clippers work just fine, especially for holiday stuff. Make sure you get the rose right away into water. Do not let it sit out on the cabinet when you're working with it, because your rose can get an air bubble and that's what causes their little heads to droop off. All right, so I'm going to continue with these roses. Like I said, I'm pulling the leaves off with my fingers. Any broken petals or like this is something is very common you see with roses, and this is unfortunate. I'm going to try to salvage it, but they'll split right down here. You'll see that. But just very gently pull the petals off. If you have a rose that's broken like that, then you can just use the petals in your decor. And I'm also going to show you guys how to open them up as well. So we're going to use clippers here, cut it, and then stick it right into the water. And same thing, just keep pulling those leaves right off. You want to gently take off the packing petals. Those are those ones that kind of look funky or crushed. Those protect the roses while they're in transit. So they're just called packing petals, and you can either take them off or not take them off. It's up to you if you like the kind of misshapen or mushed look. I'll explain it. And then I'll show you this one again with the knife. You see, if your knife's sharp and you just use this torque method, you'll get a nice sharp. But these are such pretty roses. And they're really unusual. The color is really unusual. These were $19 for 7 roses, which is not too bad, especially for this color. And I'm just gonna give them all a nice quick fresh cut. See, this one has a lot of foliage on it. Like I said, you can usually tell when the roses or flowers are dyed. A lot of times you can tell at the bottom too. They'll look dyed at the bottom, but the leaves will usually pull that color. This color, when I was a florist and then was working as a wholesaler, this was a hot color for weddings and for brides doing the boho bohemian look, and you could not get these roses. This rose is called Toffee. And I don't know if this is specifically, this doesn't look as high petal count. Oh, this one's nice and firm. It should feel like that, like a hard-boiled egg. But this is a good rose. Good color for this time of year, very autumnal. And when you're pulling the rose leaves off, do it purposely. Don't pull where it strips the bark off. And then cut again. So the reason I'm doing these roses first is I want to do this, take all their foliage off, and let them drink for a little bit before I work with them. That gives them a moment to absorb some water and rest. So as you work with your cut flowers, it's a really good idea because it is so messy. Just throw everything away like right away. So be right back while I do that. Okay, same thing with the Eryngium, just cutting that rubber band off and removing the plastic. That's what you need your scissors for. And then you're going to have this, which are 1, 2, 3. So I got these 3 stems of Eryngium at my local wholesaler for $5, which is an incredibly good price. Not wholesaler, grocery store. And these are great because you can also dry these. They're very fun. And they're also kind of that blue color, sort of the color that I used. I have some I think I have some artificial Eryngium I showed you guys in my Halloween decor. But these are so pretty, and they have a lot of bracts on them. So what you would do with these then is you're going to cut them on, and you see I have a little broken one there. You're going to cut them on the bracts. So what I'm doing right now is prepping my stems before I design. I already know I'm going to do something short, so there's no sense in keeping everything long. This is a low centerpiece. So table centerpieces should generally be around 9 or 10 inches in height. They can be as long and narrow as you want, but you want to be able to see over them. One thing that is not good is when your guests come to sit down at your table and then you have to move the centerpiece out of the way, and people do it all the time. But if you want to keep it easy and where it's part of the tablescape and you don't have to rearrange once you get your food going and all that, then keep it in that dimension. And then what I like to do, because right now, like I would just say, yeah, I'm going to take all these outer side pieces off. And then, you know, you're going to have a piece like this. And then I'll cut that short with my knife. So I have more shorter stems to deal with and work with. Those in my little vase over here. And then, or there's other ways you can do it where you can take your clippers. You see how the stems are here, you can clip it in like so. And then you'll have, if you need it to extend or have a longer piece in your centerpiece, then this is a kind of a way to go there. And then you always want to look at what you have. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements on it, and I might only need like 3 on this stem, and I might want to go in, oh, wrong scissors, clippers, scissors, must use the right tool. And then I can cut it, and you see how I can get a lot more mileage out of the stems, because remember, I am not, I'm using all of these things fairly short. So those are going to go in the water. And then another stem like so. And if I want to, I can just cut that. So you have a main, always on these filler benches, usually there's a main flower with some side. And then I can cut it like so. So many different ways to cut the stems and use them. And right now, I'm going to, let's just show you something real quick. This is a really pretty vintage cottage style stoneware jug that I have, pitcher. And let's see if we can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to, can you see? I'm going to just really lightly, say I just wanted to do this with just those 2 things. And I'm going to just really lightly use the shorter pieces. Oh, let's say the mid-sized pieces like so. Okay. And how you design, it's kind of like a pie. Think round, okay? Come in from one side to the other. Let me start over there so you can see that a little bit better. So this is your pitcher. So I'm going to put one over here, one over here. So I'm putting them in at an angle. And then like so. And then if there's something on one side, I want something on the other side. So I'm doing that. And then this is a nice big piece that could be the center, but you don't put your center in first because it will just fall to the side. And then I'm going to put that right in the middle. So even that, super casual and very simple. And then if I wanted to, just by process, how I processed, I could do the same thing with those roses. And so same thing. Wherever there's something on one side, you're going to match it with something on the other side. And that's basic, simple 101 arranging. You never go into the middle first because it'll just drop off to the side. So you always want to work the sides of the vase first. And this only came with 7 roses. And I didn't cut them short at all. I'm just leaving them as they are. So super basic and simple. This is going to give you a little bit lighter, looser look than if I had just taken this bouquet and shoved it in the vase by itself, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put all these in water. And I'm going to show you how I will do this in a very pretty vintage cornucopia that I have, okay? So that's that, very simple. Right now, they're gonna drink while we work on the cornucopia. All right, guys, I hope this level is good so you can see what we're doing here. And these were those really beautiful roses that I just put in this pretty vase. And they're drinking right now. But the first arrangement we're going to make is very simple. It's so simple. You can do this so easily, and you may have seen this done before. There's just a clear glass bowl, could be any size, even though this one is higher than I recommended. This would be good on a sideboard. You could use it as a centerpiece because it's going to pretty much be clear, and you're not going to have so much of an obstructed view with this one. One of my super easy tricks is to use a candle, some cinnamon sticks, and fresh cranberries. And then I also foraged in our yard some bramble, which is kind of like a grapevine, but not really. It's kind of has that sort of wild viney look. And I also have clematis in my yard. You might have ivy. You could have an ivy plant. You don't have to buy anything special. If you don't want to do the greenery, you don't have to do the greenery at all. Let me grab that. So with this look, you're going to use a battery operated candle. You can do this with a with a real candle and use water in here. It's up to you. You can do it either way. And all you're going to do, this is the vine. I just cut a piece of bramble. It's already starting to turn colors. And gently just push that down inside, like so. Okay. And then you're going to take some cinnamon sticks. You're going to make like a little raft at the bottom for the candle. And I just throw a few cinnamon sticks in there first for my candle to sit on, because the bottom of this is not quite straight. This will help a little bit with that, maybe. And then I'm gonna add in some cranberries, and I'm gonna layer the cranberries and the cinnamon sticks a few at a time. And some of them may go into the candle. That's okay, because it's battery operated. Doesn't matter. And I just use a bag of cranberries here, which is a really inexpensive option. And you can see my cranberries just filled up. So what we're going to do is, I don't want to block the light that much. It's a cranberry explosion. And those cranberries will help also to hold that candle into place. I'll use my hand this time and reach around. Y'all have to forgive me. I'm a little rusty. It's been a while since I designed. I retired from the floral community several years ago. Floral design industry a few years ago. I had been a florist for 30 plus years, and it had just started to take its toll on my body. So I had to really, focus on something else for a change, which is my art. And I haven't been able to do art for many years. So it's one of the reasons I don't do flowers. And then once you have that in, I just throw in a few more cinnamon sticks. And the really lovely thing about this is you can make it as elaborate or as simple as you want. And basically can use it for a few days into Christmas, because it definitely has Christmas. You could do this also at Christmas time, but this is just so basic and simple, and it's stupid easy. You don't need to do anything special. You could also do this in smaller versions with tea lights and bubble bowls, but this just makes a nice, simple little accent. You can put this on your coffee table, on a sideboard, whatever. It's pretty easy, and as you can see, and I'll show that and it's in a pretty setting. Okay, but one of the things that I love doing is finding old vintage containers to use for centerpieces. This is an old cornucopia. And this is a pressed glass cornucopia. This is probably 50s or 60s. That one's more likely from the 40s. But problem with cornucopia is the way that they lay flat, and it's hard to get flowers to do what you want in them or without making a mess. So with this type of cornucopia, as well as the basket cornucopia, there's ways you have to build those up to create a stable environment for the flowers. This one's super simple. This is how I did the one for the table that I already have, and then this one is going to be more of a traditional arrangement. But how I did this one is I literally just took a battery operated candle without cranberries in it, and I wrapped it in batting. Actually, I think I even used my webbing from Halloween, and I put that inside, so it instantly created a lantern. Also, isn't it funny? I always think cornucopias look like witch hats. You could do something fun like that for Halloween too. I just put that inside, wrapped it, and then I layered in the dried flowers. Let me demonstrate that for you. You can also use real fruit with artificial fruit. So this is actually spider web material. Hey guys, camera died in the middle of that one, so I didn't realize that till I was editing. So I'm coming back to show you just really quickly how I did this part. So here we go. Very simple. I just took the glass cornucopia. I have a battery operated candle that I wrapped with my spider webbing, and I'm going to use keep the on-off switch where it's easily accessible, unless it's of course on a timer. I don't remember if this one is or not, but you may want to do that. And then I will place this on the table and design it there. So we're adding some grapes down here below. I'm doing a silk hydrangea. I'm just pushing that in. And then these are my paper flowers that I made. And you can use, of course, silk flowers, or if you want to do the tutorial on this, this is from Merveille's and Papier. I've spoken about her a few times on my channel here. Wonderful French paper mache artist here on YouTube. And you should definitely check her out. Her workshops are completely worth it. I love all of these. I've used them in many places around the house, and I'm going to continue to do so. So with this one, it's just really a simple setup. This is a very easy centerpiece to do. It's already low. I couldn't decide whether I liked the candle in there or not. I really like real candlelight, but I thought, you know what, it's not bad. And overall, it does the job. You can also, once we get it on the table, which we're gonna go now, I'm gonna go put it on the table. Excuse me, I'm gonna go put it on the table so you can see it. This is why you want to do it there, because everything's gonna fall. All right, so I've got that on the table, and I'll show you that at the end of the video when I show you how all of the different centerpieces look on the tablescapes. All right, so this is a cornucopia, this is vintage, and what I've done is added water to it, making sure that it's watertight. That's very important. If you don't have a glazed container, then you're going to need to put something inside of it. I have here, this is a Florist Flower Frog. I'm going to put that inside. I do not use Oasis. You can get a brick of Oasis from your wholesaler, but or actually from your florist, but the problem with Oasis is it's got a lot of chemicals in it, carbon black, formaldehyde. It's really bad stuff, and I stopped using it many years ago when I was a florist because it just has a really high carbon footprint. I have to redo this because my camera stopped recording there for a second. All right, so this is chicken wire, and chicken wire this is actually plasticized chicken wire from the florist. I've mentioned this to you guys before. It's different from what you find at, say, Lowe's or Home Depot, where that kind of chicken wire oh, some deer in the yard. You guys, I'm always waiting to see, so if they come up closer, I'll stop filming and we'll record them. They're distracting me. We have to take a look real quick. They're way back in the back of the property. Okay. The difference between regular chicken wire and plasticized is it won't rust, so it's safe to use in water, and for your vintage containers especially, you don't want the flowers to rust. All right, so you're just going to make a little loose ball, and that's going to be your armature. And I have cut several different types of greenery from around my property that I'm going to use here. This is lavender, and it's funny, somebody told me that it wouldn't do very well here, and it's one of the hardiest plants I have out there. It seems to handle the freeze pretty well. I've cut some lavender, Smells amazing. It doesn't have any flowers on it, but we're going to use it just for the foliage. And when you're arranging, you're going to always think of it as a pie. You're going to have a round circular design area, and then you're going to split that in half and into quarters. So visualize, if you had an aerial view, that there was a pie or a circle over your arrangement. And when you have a weird arrangement or a weird container like this, it's kind of hard sometimes to design in that. So if you just can pretend you don't see that, you see your water source, just picture a plate over it. And you're going to design, actually demonstrate that. So this is a pie, okay? Cut it in half, cut it in half. So if I have that centered over, the way that I'm going to design is on each side of the pie. Does that make sense? All right, so this is for simple basic design. This isn't anything that's like crazy. I'm going to take my pieces, make sure they're not too long, but also, guys, once you cut it, you cannot make it longer. Well, I mean, technically you can wire it to a pick, but it has to have a water source. So make sure that you don't cut things too short. You can always trim it down a little bit, but it's very difficult to get that long stem again. And I'm going to arrange those. And I'm coming off the sides of my container and at an angle and low. Okay, so I'm just adding some lavender branches and putting them in. And now make sure they're in the water. It's real easy to put these in and their stems will flip up. So make sure you have them in the water. Okay, and you can see them. And then once you're done with your design, you can add more water and top it off. And like that one just fell. So I'm gonna make sure it's in there well. And sometimes it just takes another foliage stem to keep it propped up. I'm going to do that right over here. This is Elaeagnus or silverberry. If you're in the South, you might be familiar with this. It's called silverberry. It's got a really pretty light green on the back. And then I'm going to use my clippers. Clippers work the best on greenery. Whenever you're cutting greenery or flowers, make sure you just don't go in and chop them off. Find a lateral, that's the part of the stem where it breaks, and cut it from there. Okay, and then remove the foliage, and so none of that is in water. So I stripped all the foliage on those pieces as well. So I'm going to arrange and take off any excess foliage. Foliage is what causes flowers to die the fastest because that bacteria on the stems contaminates the water, and that's when you have problems with your water. And I'm going to just insert that there. And I'm still keeping all my greenery low. I had a little bit of silver maple that sprouted up on one of the trees, and it's a nice autumn color. I'm going to add that. And as you can see, just going side to side, okay? Let me flip it around. So whenever there's something on one side, there's going to be something on the other side. And keeping my middle greenery low. If you don't do that, you're going to have this bushy thing up in the middle here. And remember, we want to keep it fairly low, 9-10 inches. This is a piece of blackberry foliage that I have growing outside. How do you guys say foliage? I hear people say foliage. Foliage? Foliage. All right, this is autumn sedum. I have that still hanging out in the yard right now. It has not succumbed yet to the freeze. This comes back every year. It's a very pretty kind of dusty rose mauve color. As it ages, it gets darker. So all I'm doing is going side to side with these pieces. And now I have just a really, even just this by itself is really pretty. I could literally just set a pumpkin in there and call it a day. All right, I'm doing a blue and gold theme to kind of go with these plates. And I'm gonna do a table setting with these plates so you guys can see how that looks. And then with the Eryngium, I'm going in and just cutting small bits. I'm putting those short stems on the outside of the design. Make sure you're always designing from the inside, from the outside up. If you try to go into a vase this way, all your flowers are going to fall over. And when I was teaching floral design classes, I would teach this with the roses, and maybe I'll show you guys that too. I'll get these out of here first. Okay. So you have some really interesting pieces, and I don't even need all of this for this arrangement. The beauty of these types of designs is you have a mixture of flowers, and you can kind of just use what you need. Don't overfill. A lot of florists are guilty of that. And I'm just adding those little blue touches. You guys can see those. I'll do some close-up shots of this arrangement as well. Do you see how easy that's coming together? So all of these flowers are foliage is creating an armature, and everything is interlacing with each other. That's why when I go to put my roses in, they're the last thing I'm going to put in. They're my focal flower. I won't need really to fuss with it too much. They're just going to go in right where I put them. And before I do that though, I'll show you guys what I mean about designing with the roses. This is the easiest way to teach people, I have found, to get them to see, because when you have so many different kinds of flowers, it kind of looks chaotic and hard to understand. So if I wanted to make an arrangement of roses in this vase, I'm not going to go in like this and let them fall. They're just going to fall anyway. And I don't have a full dozen here, and they're all kind of different angles. Somehow lost my knife. There it is. All right, so if I cut my stems, I'm going at an angle away from each other. Okay? And then even this one's kind of a wonky shaped container. So I'm cutting my stems, and what I have here is on the pie, if this is a circle, one over here, one over here, one over here, one over here, right? So if I turn my vase around, I'm going to be able to see the same thing on all the sides. If I try to get the middle one to stand up right now, it's just going to fall over. So you need to have an armature around it. And that's why when you see like a dozen rose arrangement made, it's stems, the stems are all kind of fanned out like this. It's because the designer has built them up that way. Okay, so the last one goes in. So it may make sense to you. Now at this point, most people would do greenery, but what I'm doing is just kind of demonstrating how I do this with the roses. But you could start using greenery to help, okay? So you always just kind of go in where something is not. Yeah, and see, this is something that's unfortunately happens with these roses. They get split at the bottom. A lot of times it's from a bacterial, or it's actually, it's called, what is it called? Oh, my brain just went blank. Not bursitis, botrytis. I'll throw it up. It's been a while. But as you can see, now that I'm putting the ones in the middle, they stand up better. Does that make sense? Okay. Same thing you wouldn't want to do when you get them from the wholesaler or the florist. You don't want to just plop them in the vase when they're like this, because they're going to look very like an inverted triangle, and it's not as pleasing to the eye. Now, since I've done that already, I could go in, as you saw when I started this one, I actually added the eryngium first to build that structure. But as you can see, I can just literally now tuck it in wherever. And it's a little bit more pleasingly designed, and once you do that too, and you have enough greenery to create that armature, the flowers will stay in place. We're going to use these roses in this arrangement. Now at this point, if I have grapes, this is where I'm going to add my grapes. Let me grab those. So these are real grapes, and I also have artificial grapes. I keep a lot of these things around because sometimes I don't feel like going out and buying flowers. They're super easy to work with. You just tuck them in, and their job is done. That one still has its little price tag on it. But you can actually add real grapes in at this point and lace them over the greenery and let them hang. What's going to happen is they'll create another armature in their own way. And then, my daughter's just cracking it. All right, so I've got a really pretty combination going right here. I don't know if you guys can see this up without spilling it. Just even that's just pretty. I also have, I have some beautiful full dried pomegranates, and I'm gonna add those in for that kind of rustic color. I could also have done the red grapes here as well. Okay, and then I'm just laying them around, and the beauty of this container is its weird shape kind of helps hold all these things. All right, so everything I have here so far is stuff that I already had, except for the fresh grapes. The plants, everything came from my yard. The pomegranates I dried years ago. They used to be fresh on a branch. They were, when I lived in California, that's an easy place to get pomegranates. You can dry them and they work great. Now, say you don't want to, you don't have to use this entire thing of flowers if you don't want to. But what I want to show you is a little trick. And I took those packing petals off, right? I'm gonna go in with my fingers. This always freaks people out. I'm gonna go in with my fingers very gently inside and open these roses up, okay? It's almost like when you have a bun and you put your fingers inside there and you kind of spread it open with your hand. I'm just gonna do it very gently. These are very cold. You don't wanna force it. If you want a really gorgeous open garden rose look though, you can just take the petals and you roll them against your thumb, and that helps open them up. This is a florist trick. It's like a couture rose. I prefer them when they look a little bit more naturally open, but if you need a little volume and your roses are too tight, you definitely can do that. And you're not gonna hurt the rose, I promise you, as long as you're not, jabbing your hand in there. And then you just gently open it up. By doing that too, it kind of helps them when if you want them to be more open. A rose should be open and glorious. It's not supposed to look like a tight little bud. Believe it or not though, a lot of growers grow them to stay tight because consumers think that they're getting a fresher rose when they're tight. All right, and I opened up another rose, and then same thing with this one. Just very gently fold it over your hands like this, and then just gently use your fingers to open it up. I promise you it will not hurt the rose. So I've got 3 roses in here, and instead of just doing a triangular pattern where I've got bop, 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 I'm going to do a couple on this side so they're grouped together, and then one on this side over here, and then I'm going to tuck in a darker rose, and I'm hoping, and yes, I did just cut that, hoping these don't fall apart. And I'm bringing it down into the middle lower. And so I have 5 roses in here, which is plenty for this size arrangement. And that keeps it relatively inexpensive, especially if I want to create a smaller side arrangement with something else. Now, what's fun about this is if I wanted to, I could actually incorporate one of these paper flowers if I wanted, making sure that they were not into the foliage. You could also put some cinnamon sticks in here, and ties in our cinnamon kind of tones, which looks really pretty. So really simple. It's just a bowl of flowers, isn't it? But look how nice. And then once I have that on the table, I'll finesse it a little bit more by adding, like, this is clematis vine, and I'll have that kind of trail down, and we'll put that in as a fun accent. You could even put it in like so, and just have a little smaller accent greenery if you want or not, depends on how you like it. That's pretty much it. That's a very simple, took me just a few minutes to put together. And honestly, once you have it on the table too, you can kind of play with it if you need to add more, and we'll do that. We'll set up a table display with this one. All right, so for this table, I'm using a really beautiful old Battenberg lace tablecloth. You can see there. And then I've layered organza applique with fall leaves and grapes. And then I added clematis vine to the middle of the table. And then my table settings, I'm using the blue, the gold, and the brown. And let's see how that centerpiece looks there. I think it looks really beautiful and the colors look fine. The height's good, and you can really see that it's a Horn of Plenty now that the flowers are arranged in this vintage vessel. And here is the finished table. Just a very beautiful neutral blues, greens, golds. The toffee color from the roses is picked up by the gold napkins. I have stag napkin holders on those gold damask napkins. I think that's very pretty and very apropos for the season. I use those as well for Christmas, and in pagan traditions, that stag is pretty iconic. There's a couple of turkeys and salt and pepper shakers. There's green glassware. I ran that autumn clematis vine all the way down the table, so it really ties all those gorgeous blues and greens together. Just a very lovely, elegant setting. I just think it all worked very well together. I have used these blue and gold plates in the past. They are English masonware plates. The vintage corn holders. Corn! It's corn! Sorry, I could not resist. I've had those for a while, picked those up at a thrift store. And not only are they great for holding ears of corn, but you can also set your used utensils in them, and that kind of protects the tablecloth. I think overall it's very pretty. I've taken some still shots as well, so you guys can see just how pretty the colors work well together. And most everything I have on the table is vintage, thrifted. Very, very few new things there that I can see. Maybe the placemats, the raffia placemats. Here is a modern version of a centerpiece in that glass cylinder bowl that we saw, or glass sphere shaped bowl that we did earlier with the candles. And you can see it's a very clean, simple, modern, has a nice woodland look as well. It's a suitable centerpiece. And then finally, the cornucopia that I did on the original tablescape on the first Thanksgiving tour video, and I think all that works just as well too. So those are 3 different options for you for your table, and see how easy they can be put together. I hope you guys found that super helpful. Another thing to keep in mind when you're foraging or cutting greenery from your yard is to know your plants. Don't mistakenly cut poison ivy. It's an infamous episode of Schitt's Creek, which is one of my favorite shows of all time, taught us. And I know many florists who forage and get themselves into thorns and thickets and all that. So make sure you're being careful of what you forage. And do something that's called judiciously prune. Don't whack a whole bush down. Just take a little bit here and there and try to remember to cut on those laterals so you're not tipping out your plants unnecessarily. That's something that will help encourage new growth on your plants and give you a better looking garden in the long run. The other thing to keep in mind when you're foraging from outside is cut your foliage a couple days or a day before, set it in cool, tepid water, and let them kind of drink for a bit, and make sure any bugs or creepy crawlies, you don't want any nasty surprises hopping out onto your Thanksgiving table. Just, common sense things. Also, some greenery can stain. If you're not careful and you rub it on a white tablecloth, it's going to stain your tablecloth, so keep that in mind. And just remember to keep things low so that they're not poking up at people. And I think that's it. If you guys have any questions or you want more help with floral design, let me know down below. And I haven't asked before, but subscribe if you like. Thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. Doesn't matter to me as long as you find it helpful. That's what makes me happy. And I hope you all have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving. And thank you so much for being here with me. I hope you have a great day.